Yeah, very warm welcome to this Saturday. This is Andy Peter and Timothy Spearman. This is the Knights of Liberty show live on the Freedom Talk Radio Network.
freedomtalkradio.co.uk.
Let's go!
This is the most diverse, most amazing, one of the funniest radio stations you could ever listen to on the internet. I've heard so much stuff from the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights.
The politics, the non-politics, the schmolitics, whatever you want to call them.
It's great.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is freedomtalkradio.net, and you are listening to Freedom Talk Radio.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Thanks for listening to the Knights of Liberty show live with Andy Peter from the UK and Timothy Spearman from Canada. Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 5 p.m. UK time. Find the Knights of Liberty radio show on Facebook or visit Tim's website at www.shakespeare.com or visit www.lulu.com. Search for Timothy Spearman and find his book Sailing the Seven Seas, Butterfly Dreams and Odds on Favourite. Visit the station's website at www.freedomtalkradio.co.uk or email the show at freedomtalkradio2013@gmail.com. Skype us at Freedom Talk Radio 1. Thanks for listening to the Knights of Liberty show.
Yeah, very warm welcome to Saturday, 3 minutes past 5 in the UK, and it's 3 minutes past 12 in Eastern Standard Time. How's your week been, Tim? Mine's been absolutely dandy.
Well, Mercury has been retrograde for the whole month, and I gotta tell you, Andy, it hasn't been smooth sailing at my end, but we're keeping the ball in the air somehow. A lot of communication glitches, and I finally figured out why that is. When Mercury's retrograde, what happens is that our planet comes into the trajectory of the planet nearest to the sun, and the shield that it provides when it's in forward motion as it appears to our planet kind of, the shield isn't there when it's retrograde, so we get bombarded with solar flares and disrupts communications and things of that nature. So I do think that there really is a physical law in play, an electromagnetic field law in play, and it's not just astrology and some kind of whimsical, mystical element that doesn't have any basis in science. I think there is something going on with that planet. Anyway, it hasn't been fun. It's been a very disruptive week. But I understand you have an interesting guest. So would you like to introduce him?
Well, I was just going to mention at 6:30 UK time and 1:30 Eastern, we have another interesting guest for the second hour, and that's Nick Wuko's son, and he's a US candidate in Florida, and he'll be telling us his passion to help children in his area in the US, so through the sort of political route. But yeah, we have a fantastic guest. We've been waiting for this for a long time. We've sort of found him recently, and we're joining, sort of social media-wise, helping each other's organisations when we can and where we can. Brian Daniels is from the organisation on Human Rights for Children. The full title is Citizens Commission on Human Rights, and they're a watchdog that basically helps children and families when it comes to the rules of drugs and all that kind of thing. So, Brian Daniels, welcome to the Knights of Liberty show on the Freedom Talk Radio Network.
Thank you, Andy. That's very kind of you. Hello to you, and hello to Tim in Canada.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Very nice to have you on board. Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us all about the organisation and sort of what you do in the organisation, and then we'll try and find a topic to sort of carry on with.
Yeah. The organisation, as you said, Citizens Commission on Human Rights, it is raising awareness in regards to human rights within the field of mental health. When you look at what goes on within the mental health field, whether it's, well, more often than not, it's involuntarily. Treatment is given involuntarily. One is detained involuntarily. And the human rights aspect of a person's life tends to get forgotten. What we're looking at is how we can raise awareness about this and thereafter allow a person, whether they be a child or an adult, to actually have rights when they are being detained in a way where their civil liberties have been completely taken away.
I can see the need for that because here, just in the province of Ontario in Canada, they have what's called the Ontario Mental Health Act, and you can be admitted under an involuntary admission order and be observed under an observation period of 72 hours when they try to determine what your mental health problem actually is. And you're not supposed to be medicated during that period, but they do medicate them. That's a lie. And in addition, you're supposed to have someone called a patient rights advocate at your disposal to protect your rights. And if you go into those facilities and ask those patients who their patient rights activist is, they'll say, who? What?
Yeah.
Could you tell me what that is? They don't have a clue. So there you go.
Yeah, here in the United Kingdom, we have the Mental Health Act. And under various sections of this act, people can be detained for assessment or indeed for treatment. But again, when they are detained, they don't have the rights. Obviously, a psychiatrist or a mental health professional will say, well, they do have rights. But the point being is they don't have an awful lot of say in what's going on. I know there are moves to make that more, if you like, transparent so that they do have more say, but the calls that we get are what we base, well, that's what we hear. We get calls from people who have been detained, who don't have rights, who are trying to get some kind of resolution to whatever it is that they're experiencing as a problem, yet they can't seem to get through to the people who are detaining them. And one gentleman only recently, he was detained, and after a certain number of weeks, he called us. We turned up at the hospital. We just made one, courtesy visit, and I think he was released within a week. Now, that's not what we're here to do. That's not our purpose. We're here to look at how human rights are, how they can be promoted within this field, because at the moment there aren't any. And we're also looking at what abuses are occurring within that field, and we look into them so that then they can be reported and something can be done about it. And that goes for children's rights too.
Well, that's very promising, and I hope that you make some progress and headway with that effort.
Sorry, Tim. Can I comment on that one? Yeah, we've heard from obviously Dr. Carley and a lot of people in the medical field about psychiatry. But going back to what Brian was saying about human rights, just in general, the Human Rights Acts of children and adults say, this is a right for you to exercise. But the biggest problem, Brian and Tim, is why? I mean, a big capital W-H-Y on this one. Why, if there's all these human rights put into legislation, why can't children and adults, especially children, access their human rights, especially the children in the care system and the children who with CALMS, I think it's child adolescent mental health
the CAMS
teams, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, child and adolescent mental health services. When it comes down to psychiatry, if we sort of bring psychiatry into this as it's going hand in hand with that particular care system. Psychiatry, what's happening there is it is using opinions on which to base their decisions. If you think about other areas of medicine, whether it be oncology, pediatrics, whatever it is, there they can base it on physical tests. Physical tests are actually carried out to find out if, for example, a child has a tumor or something, he's got something wrong with internally, his kidneys or whatever it may be. I'm not a doctor. Equally, if it's to do with oncology and they're looking for what's really wrong with the person, they can see a growth. In psychiatry, and especially with children are being told they have something wrong with their brains. They're being told they have a chemical imbalance of the brain. But there is no physical test, there's no biological marker to tell anyone and to show anyone that a chemical imbalance of the brain actually exists. And this is...
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Brilliant. No, this is great because this proves that it's a pseudoscience, because the whole basis of science is that you have some empirical proof for the claims that you're making, and there is none. And this is what I argue is the case with HIV/AIDS as well, that they don't have any definitive proof for isolating the presence of the virus in the person's system. They say that there's HIV-related antibodies and that the virus itself is too small to be detected, and so they find a trace of its presence in the form of the antibodies that the body produces to fight it. And I find this is the problem with so much of what they call science, is that it's actually pseudoscience. So, it's so good that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment based on one of your articles, and I really do think now that we've been right all along, Tim, because the CCHR, basically you expose psychiatry and the big pharma, and we've been telling people, always research what we're telling you, but basically, the idea of giving a pill to shut you up is very, very tempting to doctors and chemists and anybody. But what really hurts me, and I've met people with mental health problems that probably didn't need the tablets. So what really hurts me, and why are not enough people standing up and saying, look, mental health, it doesn't exist. Yes, they might have problems, but we can deal with that through therapy. Sometimes a good boot up the backside helps. A job, someone to talk to. Why are we allowing, that's the social services saying, why are we allowing doctors to prescribe medication and hospitals to people, especially children, when they don't really need it?
Well, that's an interesting point there, Andy. Only today in the Daily Mail in the United Kingdom, there was a psychiatrist who was stating that parents and schools are the ones who are pushing for labels. Now, when you look at that's, if you could say that's shoving all the responsibility onto the parents and the schools. The psychiatrists are the ones who come up with the labels, and the parents are reading various newspaper articles or hearing radio stories about these so-called conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then they are this psychiatrist is stating that the parents are pursuing a label, which quite frankly isn't true. There may be parents who seem to think that there's something wrong with their child, but at the end of the day, these labels are purely based on opinion and a set of behavioral and emotional characteristics. Behavior isn't an illness. Behavior is behavior. Children do play up. children do have problems in life, but it doesn't mean that they're mentally ill. And going back to that point of a chemical imbalance, that is why drugs have been introduced into these young lives, because the drugs are supposedly going to resolve this made-up idea of a chemical imbalance. And there's an interesting point here. If you think that there's a chemical imbalance, when then is there a balance in the chemicals? If they're saying there's a chemical imbalance, there must be a point at which there is a balance. You can't even test for that either.
Yeah, Tim, I was talking to a doctor a couple of days ago, and we weren't talking about psychiatric drugs. We was actually doing a nutritional show, and the lady doctor did actually say, if you eat plenty of avocados, and I mean basically what our Maggie's been telling us, you know, the stuff with magnesium in it and potassium and, you know, all that technical stuff, but basically very healthy, you can bring yourself back to a normal sort of balance. I mean, but then again, you know, I mean, I actually think the imbalance is lack of willpower. I don't know if anyone agrees with that.
Well, actually, on the point of an imbalance, let's go back to the point that you made and what the doctor was saying, or this nutritionist was saying. You know, what is it that's perhaps missing in a person's diet? Here at CCHR, what we will tell callers is to go find a non-psychiatric doctor, in other words, a medical doctor, who can do a battery of tests to find any undiagnosed physical conditions, not psychiatric conditions, but physical conditions that may be manifesting as a so-called mental disorder. And this point that you make, you know, essential nutrients in your diet, if they are missing, a person can manifest so-called problems that are currently listed as a mental disorder. No, it could well be an undiagnosed physical condition.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the treatments that have been orchestrated over the centuries to treat things like schizophrenia, like drilling holes in one's head, or inducing vomiting, emetics, they called it, or performing exorcisms, or punishing the body in the hope of driving out the demonic spirit, and then frontal lobotomy operations, which I believe are still performed, although probably most people would deny that that's the case. I still believe they are performed. And chemical lobotomies are being performed by the chemicals that these patients are given. I have ample evidence to support that claim. And a lot of the criminal behavior that we see, like the Columbine High School shooting incidents and others, have been attributable to the effects of the Prozac or the lithium or whatever drug has been prescribed on the psychology and the effect it had on the psychology of these young people. So when you look at the history of how mental illness has been treated, it seems rather barbaric, but then I'm sure future generations will look at what we're doing and see it as equally barbaric. So the amount of progress that's actually been made is marginal, and I don't think that we're any less barbaric than our forebears in terms of treatment.
Picking up on that point about the like Columbine and the school shooters, on CCHR's international website, it says that at least 34 school shootings and or school-related acts of violence have been committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs. Now, it's not a sort of a commonly known thing, but those particular incidents resulted in 167 wounded and 78 killed. But it's not just while the person's taking them, it can also be when they are withdrawing from these drugs.
Right, the effects of withdrawal from any form of drug could be quite extreme, and if they're amphetamine-based, like Ritalin, you could imagine the repercussions of that, because you would fall into a depressive rut because your dopamine and tryptamine chemicals are suddenly falling off the cliff, and so you're going to be in a state of suicidal and even homicidal madness at that point. especially when you've been hooked on this drug for months and months, and then suddenly it's taken away.
Yeah. This point about the chemical imbalance as well. There's a UK psychiatrist called Dr. Joanna Moncrief. Now, there was something she said in the press recently, and she said that although doctors, the media, and society in general have latched onto the idea that depression and anxiety are just evidence of a chemical imbalance, there's no hard evidence to support this. And that comes back to your point, Tim, is that there's nothing empirical to actually support any of these conditions.
Yeah, even the diagnosis itself in terms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and other such so-called mental disorders, it's all clinically based. There's no laboratory test to decide, as you mentioned. And I've had students in my classes that have claimed to have been misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, and then they later found that they had some other disorder. And so I said, are you now confident that they've got the diagnosis right? And they said yes. And then after finishing my course, they were left in doubt again because they're not sure whether they've been clinically diagnosed correctly or not. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have the answer to that, so I'll just
no.
You know.
When you look at that, well, there was a psychiatrist. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was you may have heard of him, Dr. Thomas Szasz. He's probably the most vociferous, outspoken psychiatrist against his own profession. What he said about schizophrenia was that it's behavior of which the majority object. That's not verbatim, but it's basically saying it's this behavior of which a lot of people find repulsive, and it's been lumped together as a disorder. But you look for any tests for schizophrenia. I've asked many times for tests for different types of disorders or conditions, and there are no tests for schizophrenia. There's a lot of money thrown at research in order to find the gene, the so-called schizophrenia gene. But well, hey, I guess they just need more money, and I say that with my tongue firmly in my cheek.
Well, there does seem to be evidence that there's a hereditary congenital link between the eccentric behavior that has been labeled schizophrenia and the ancestral family tree, but that, as you rightly pointed out, could just simply be hormonal or chemical imbalance. And why call it a mental illness when it's simply something that's genetic that could easily be addressed through some other form of remedial formula that involves nutrition and diet and lifestyle. And
exactly. I like it. Exactly, Tim. Lifestyle, education. Is the child doing well in school, or an adult? How's he doing in life? Are there environmental toxins affecting the way they behave? There's a gamut of things that could be checked for, rather than just some kind of opinion about a person's behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need to, be more concerned about diet and make efforts to do away with a lot of these preservatives and chemicals that we see in food, and find other ways of achieving food preservation that won't be causing these disturbances within our bodies. And you look at Korean food or many of these Asian diets, and you can see that it's greatly superior to ours, and it is a form of medicine. It is, if you want to put it this way, a kind of preventative medicine, because I know just by having kimchi, which is a kind of fermented cabbage side dish with your meal every day, you're going to ward off disease. You're going to ward off colds and flu bugs that would otherwise, run rife through the population. I find that Koreans are very healthy and seldom miss a day of work and are in good trim. And, I can't say that I got sick when I was living there for 11 years. I think I had one bout with the flu, and that was because of stress, because I was just too run down with too many adversities that were happening at the time. Other than that, I was perfectly healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Tim,
Yeah.
Brian, I've got a comment from somebody, and then I'll tell you a small story, but not a big one. Kirk has just said, both of you are correct. A person's diet can and does cause physical imbalances. When a psychiatrist sits with a patient for only minutes and prescribes a drug without any blood tests, let alone asking the person what they consume in their diet, the doctor is nothing more than a drug pusher. Even in his holistic practice, he asks, what a person consumes on a regular basis. Now, talking about food, when you go on holiday, I mean, I went to Egypt recently, and do you know what? I felt my brain had exploded with laughter. Now, that may seem a bit strange. You know how life makes you really stressed, Tim, and I needed that. I needed that break. But when I went away, yeah, my brain, my body was laughing because of the food I was eating. And as soon as I came back, I thought, that's it. It's got to be lemons forever, garlic, swallow it whole. It's got to be the avocado. It's got to be the vitamin B6, the multiple vitamins. And do you know, since I've been sticking to advice, I don't look healthy, but I feel like I could run a marathon. And mentally, I'm sharp. So there is an answer really to pills. You don't need them. End of. Because if people look back into years ago, Tim, there was no pills out there. You had to drain the juices of different plants to get whatever, to get better. Or it was just simple salt that would rub into a wound, We didn't have pills. The reason for pills, I think, and I don't want to go off subject, but it's slightly to control us so we can do what we're told to do.
Mm-hmm. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley kind of puts it in perspective. It was the plan, and it has been implemented, and it's a soft form of totalitarian control.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on the pill side of things, and coming back into the frame of the children and how children are being labelled and then drugged, here in England alone, in 2013, there was, in terms of packets of drugs, there was over 1 million packets of ADHD drugs that were actually handed out, or in other words, dispensed in the community. Over 1 million. So that might equate, one child may have more than one during a year, as in one prescription. But that's a lot of packets of drugs, and those cost £55 million to the taxpayer in England alone. When you put that up against the idea of a chemical imbalance, which has never been proven, you put that up against a set of behavioral characteristics which are pretty synonymous with normal childhood behavior. When you put it up against a child who's just wanting to actually have a bit of fun and get on in life, well, there is no comparison. There's no way that it can be right to be drugging the child for just being normal. That's not to say that children don't have problems. They do. And I recognize that. I know friends who've got children who are being a bit difficult, but they're not mentally ill. They just need a bit of TLC, or they need someone who can sit down and really listen to them, rather than just saying, well, you've got a chemical imbalance and off you go, take this drug.
Thank you. Go ahead, Andy. I know you want to read something. Please.
Yeah, no, this is, Maggie would, she's been campaigning against this for a long time.
Very important campaign.
Yeah, Children's Scream to be Heard totally agrees with the CCHR, because Maggie's been saying about the ADHD drugs for a long, long time. So, Tim, you know all about the Ritalin and all that. So, this is an article from yourself. It basically, a psychiatric watchdog has criticised the decision to spend more than £1 million on ADHD drugs in Lancashire. Now, I don't actually need to read any more than that, really, because the point is, we have so many counties in this country. I don't know how many, but let's say there's only 30. If Lancashire's doing that, and it's not that big an area, considering Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire, and Somerset, if 30 counties are doing ADH drugs at £1 million, that's 30 million. Now, go on to another scenario. 1,023 children are being taken into care, and every agency gets £27,000. Again, that's another 37 million. So that's only 2 examples of what the government's doing. Now, you imagine there's thousands of services. No wonder we're in debt, because for some reason, taking the kids, the mental health drugs, the placement of children from loving parents, it just seems to be a very good money-making system. Now, what annoys me, Tim and Brian, the good people out there, the good parents, they won't get up and do demos. They'll do demos with 10 and 20 people. I just don't understand it, because it's them people. They've lost their loved ones. Some of them are losing their minds. But really deep down, they have the power to change it. And the poor working people that are just working to get by, they're paying for this government madness. I mean, to coin the phrase, it's the loonies that are running the asylum, and the loonies are the government, and we're letting them. So, we need to stand up together peacefully. We know the MPs are not listening, but your local councillors, I'm sure if you go to them enough, if you put, it may be a bit bizarre, you guys, but stick a little sticker on the side of your car. Maybe stop forced adoptions. Maybe, why are all children being drugged? I mean, just simple terms with a website, and people, they may see that car 2 or 3 times and think it's, a bit bizarre. But the next time they'll see it, they might even Google it and research for themselves. That's just a small example. And I hope everybody attends a demo on Tuesday at 11 o'clock, St Paul's Cathedral in London, for the CCHR demo. There was in Edinburgh last year, and you need a lot of support for that, Brian, don't you?
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Andy. That's kind of you. Yeah, what we're trying to do is just make a statement, as always. Wherever the Royal College of Psychiatrists go, we nearly always turn up, wherever they are, and we protest. We just make a point, again, raising human rights within the field of mental health, especially for children. And we're going to be there. Our gathering point is at St Paul's Cathedral at 11. We move off from there at midday when everybody's gathered, and then we're going to it's just a march up to the Barbican Centre, which is just a bit north of St Paul's, and we're there just to make our point. Because, if something goes unchallenged, it becomes accepted, if you know what I mean. Nobody says there's nothing wrong with what's going on, so it must be right. But unless you speak up, it will be accepted as just fact, and that's okay. No, it's not okay. This whole issue, especially surrounding children, is not acceptable. And I recently wrote something that went out all over the social media forums. But the point I was trying to make was, in schools, there's no smoking. That's in English schools. No smoking, no mobile phones, no chewing gum, but you can take a Class B drug like Ritalin. We've got we've got some serious things to make. We've got to put things right here. Otherwise, it's perverse. It's a bit like ADHD is a bit like the Emperor's new suit. Yes, this child has got it, but we can't really see it, but we know he's got it. No, we have to make changes, and that's why we'll always turn up at these conferences. We have a banner, and there's a particular message that we have, and it says, "Childhood is not a mental disorder." That's what we want to tell anybody who's actually going to be in the vicinity. Childhood is not a mental disorder. And the amount of people who agree with that, there's a lot.
Totally. I mean, I have grave concerns with this whole issue of the Royal College of Psychiatry. It sounds like the Royal Society, which basically decides on scientific convention for each generation, and if you don't happen to agree with the Royal Society, then you're kind of ostracized and marginalized, and or you don't get your funding, or you don't get any publicity or any support for any theory that you might have, which means that it's a scientific dictatorship. And as someone who's gone through the entire matriculation system and has taught at universities and colleges and institutions in 3 different continents, Europe, Asia, and here in North America, I can see gross problems with the system that we've created. I mean, one thing that we should have considered is how is it that you have a universal matriculation system across the world where you've got this degree system which is based on the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, entered apprentice, fellow of the craft, and master mason, which is basically a Catholic Church imposed system of matriculation that's been imposed upon the entire world. And you can't go to university unless you ascribe to that system. It's now worldwide. And you can't graduate unless you abide by the instructions of your supervisor. And you can't get the graduation diploma unless you read the prescribed text that they recommend that you read. And all of those are texts that have been given the clean bill of health by the establishment because they support the mandate or the recommended view that they'd like to impose on society. And if you ever question this and decide to do your own independent research, then you're in grave jeopardy of not being awarded your PhD. Consequently, it took me 7 years to have my PhD reevaluated because the institutions are in a position where they can't call the matriculation system of the other university into question, and they can't reevaluate a rejected PhD. So it took me great effort to do so. And I had to pretend that my PhD had never been submitted before, and even though it had been published and so forth, and submit it as if it had never been submitted before, and it was finally reevaluated and was given flying colors. Now, a professor emeritus at McMaster University, who was in the medical ethics department and the philosophy department, found it to be a groundbreaking work that he felt should recommend a new school of thought, and he gave it his full support and recommended it for publication. So obviously these institutions and the people in them can't even agree. So if they can't agree, then of course you can see that it's all very subjective, and that the standards that they're using to evaluate not only people's work but also their minds cannot reach an accord or a consensus, which means that only the scientific dictatorship is deciding what this person's mental condition actually is. And then you have these clinical diagnostic tools which are flawed and which wrongfully attribute different disorders to different people. And then you have fictional diseases, as is indicated by Leon Eisenberg on his deathbed when he was 87, interviewed by Der Spiegel magazine, in which he said that, and I quote him directly, ADHD is a perfect example of a fictitious disease. Now that means he's a criminal and he's a fraud and he should have been in jail long ago, long before his death. But he gets away with it and he can just smugly smile at the camera while they're interviewing him. That's not okay. He's a criminal. And all those people that endorse drugs that are very damaging to people's health under the false proviso that it's going to improve their health are criminals as well. And like Andy says, drug pushers, indeed they are. And they're no better than the drug pushers on the street. In fact, they're a damn sight worse because they're pretending to be respectable when they're not. They're clearly not. And I'm sorry, there's no excuse for ignorance under the law. I'm not even a medical professional, and I know the dangers associated with these drugs, so therefore, how could they not know? Sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but...
Yeah, can I just read out an article that Brian did write for the Somerset Guardian, just to put it into sort of, to sort of wrap up on the ADHD thing. I mean, from my point of view, I think what they're doing they're finding any old excuse to get children onto pills like they do with adults just because of certain behavioural issues. I mean, it may not be a chemical imbalance. Children are children. They've got to have a behavioural problem. And I think Maggie said something recently or a long time ago, I can't remember, but some article, she said, children are there to play up. If they don't play up, there's something wrong with them. She may explain it a little bit later if she's got time to sort of comment. But the article in the Somerset Guardian says you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out how the ADHD label has become so commonly used. While attempts are made to blind us with pseudoscience, the diagnostic criteria for ADHD could describe any child's behaviour. That behaviour, however, has been redefined for a clever manipulation and corruption of what we know to be normal. One of the items described in attention used to diagnose ADHD is often avoids, dislikes, or is reluctant to engage in tasks that require sustained mental effort, such as schoolwork or homework. This is descriptive of a normal child in a normal school or normal home, on a normal day in a normal world, but psychiatrists would have us think otherwise. Other criteria psychiatrists throw into the inattentive melting pot and reclassify as being consistent with ADHD is often forgetful in daily activities, often fails to give close attention to detail and makes careless mistakes in schoolwork. Work or other activities, or often has difficulty sustaining attention in task or play activities. Again, these are normal characteristics. Then there is another clever manipulation to redefine an active child. Children can easily fall into the following descriptions, since they reflect normal childhood. Behaviour often runs about or climbs excessively in situations in which is inappropriate, often talks excessively and is often on the go. Now, I won't read the rest of it out, there's not much more than that, but the point is, what I've just read out, and I don't know if everybody understood everything, but these are very common statements in every social worker's reports that they use against the parents when they go to take children away from them for doing nothing wrong. Only they've got a child that's a child.
Absolutely. Hell, if I had a male child in my class that wasn't playing up, I'd wonder what's wrong with him. If he wasn't looking out the window wanting to be out and playing, I'd think that he was an abnormal child. I mean, to me, it's just perfectly normal. And how dare you assume that someone's got attention deficit disorder and should be drugged because you're a boring teacher and can't maintain their intention. I mean, come on. That's almost like a cruel form of punishment that would be no different than Mr. Squeers in a Dickens novel, abusing the child with his switch or his stick, except that medicine has become the switch or the stick. This is just not on, people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whichever way you look at it, whichever way you approach this whole problem surrounding children and mental health, whether they're going into care, it's all based on opinion. It's opinion. And when the psychiatrist becomes involved, then, that's all you're going to get. You're not going to get any tests. And I sound like an old gramophone record sometimes because I come back to the same old story. There's no science in psychiatry. There's no science and there's no cures. Therefore, what we're dealing with is someone who is accepted as an expert, who claims that he has he's the custodian of mental health, and therefore what he says goes and is true and is empirical. No, it's not. It's purely his opinion. And any one of us could actually give an opinion on a child's behavior or an adolescent or even an adult. We can all have our view on the way that people behave. But our view is looked upon as, well, that's Brian's view, or that's Tim's view, or that's Andy's or Maggie's. But when it's a psychiatrist, oh, well, that's obviously an expert view. No, it's not. It's just based on what he thinks is going on. There's no science.
But talking about that, Maggie wants her view now. Maggie?
Well, just hello, Brian. Just very briefly.
Hello, Maggie.
Hi. I must say it's very interesting listening to you, and it's nice to listen to Tim, who's not yelling his head off as normal. But my experience of working with children, and I have had 2 nurseries and worked with children worldwide. I always say, and going back to what Andy said earlier, children have to be naughty because that's how they learn to be good. And with the children I've always looked after, including my grandson and his friends, if there was a dispute and they were naughty, right, to the table, come along, and I'd make a joke that we're the MPs. And we'd sit and discuss, and the word I used, and I used this in a court as well, and everyone agreed, compromise. You compromise with a child. And that, it's wonderful just to sit and talk, whatever age. They're lovely, and they learn from being naughty. But coming back to children being naughty again, there are children, there's a lot of children now have changed due to the chemicals in the environment and in the food, as you know this, Brian, is affecting the brain. Because when I did the HRT campaign, the research, it was incredible how all chemicals in the food, in the water, any chemical, drugs, goes through your central nervous system, which is your spine, to the brain. And I think with a lot of children today, there is more naughtiness in them because of the chemicals.
And on that point, if it is a chemical reaction to something, or it's a toxic reaction to something, that falls under the category of a physical condition. You can find out what it is that causes that. If you ingest a particular poison or something, you get a reaction. Or if there's a toxin in the environment and you breathe it in, you get a reaction. That's not a mental illness. That's not something wrong with a person's brain. It's a physical condition, and therefore the real doctors, the people who find out what is really wrong with the person, and they find those physical conditions, are the ones that are missing. The psychiatrist, of course, he can come up with anything about a child's behavior. You really could. You could make it up. The child was having bad behavior because his little brother was born 25 minutes late. Yeah. I've just made that up. I don't know. You can just throw anything in there and you go, oh, really, doctor? Do you really think that? Well, yeah, that's absolutely right. And you go, well, how do you dispute that? Because it's an opinion.
Yeah, this is what I was just going to say, Maggie and Tim. They do make it up, the doctors and the social workers, we know that. But how do people, Maggie and Tim, how do we stop this? Especially when the doctor says, okay, then they need this drug to keep that child calm, or it may be a part of the parents doing, when really, they've exposed a situation that's not really there.
Can I say something, Tim, that's coming through? Sorry, Andy, that's coming through the helpline all the time. And another grandparent actually reported it only yesterday. When children are allowed to have contact, children in care are allowed to have contact with their families, and it's all supervised, as we know, all these written reports of the contact, of the interaction with the family, the reports are stating from the foster carers, the social workers, and the supervisors who supervise the contact, that after the contact, these children become very hyper, very disruptive, very naughty, and they're putting their and what the social services are doing, and the experts are putting it down that the family, it's the family that are causing the children to have these problems. I mean, I'm not a doctor either. I'm a Miss Nothing. But even I've got the intelligence to know if a child is being disruptive after a contact, it's because he wants his mummy or his daddy or his nan. And these experts and so forth are putting these children down again as being disruptive. I don't know if you've come across that at all.
I've come across similar, Maggie, and the various reasoning, the various justifications, or whatever they come up with as a reason for why a child is behaving badly. There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of different ideas. But what they tend to do, some of them will agree with each other, some of them won't. Some of them will come up with something new, or a new study suggests something or other, or lots of words that don't really say anything. But they're always coming up with something new to give a parent or me or you some idea why a child is having problems in life. Well, where's the test? It still comes back to that point of where is the test to support the existence of mental illness, the physical test? There are none. And we can all have an idea. I can pass an opinion about why a child was not behaving after contact with one or the other parent or whoever, but it doesn't mean it's right. It's just an opinion.
Well, that's like when they take the children away from families. It's all basically on hearsay. I mean, for the new Children and Families Bill, I wrote with suggestions to Earl Ishdale and Sir James Mumby that when a child is first taken away from the family, everything should be recorded. There should be an independent barrister or lawyer, totally independent, to stop all what's going on and to help save the children. And the CAFCAS officer and the lawyers that the courts pass to the children, these are two people who are supposed to be there to speak up for the children, but they don't. There's no one speaking for that kid when it goes into care, and all you have is hearsay, and lies, and one thing and another. And you as a family member who's wrongly accused of whatever, you cannot clear yourself. You cannot get that your good name back. They've put me down as an alcoholic drug addict. I've never taken either in my life. And when I passed all the research to the psychologist of the chemicals in alcohol and how it causes cancer to the brain, etc., and what it does to certain people, such as I, totally ignored. And the HCPC totally ignored me after taking £10 from me. How about that? Under the data, for my data. And then they said, oh, no, we don't hold it. So, yes, you're talking to an alcoholic drug addict at 71 years of age. Is the joke of the year, I think.
I'm tracking with you entirely, Maggie. The idea that it's come, again, we're talking about an adjudication, an evaluation from a so-called expert about you. That evaluation is taken on by others and go, well, it must be right because it came from that person over there who's a so-called expert. No, he's not. He's just given an opinion about Maggie Tuttle. Yeah. Again, this is what's happening with children. They are being told, or the psychiatrist is saying to the parent or to the teacher, this child is badly behaved because of X, Y, Z. Well, okay, again, and I go back to my term I use, make it up as you go along. Could be for any reason.
Well, I know of one child very close to home, and I have a gagging order, so I'm not allowed to name anything. Okay. But that child is down as dyslexia, and yet that child was top of the class, wonderful at reading and writing. But the dyslexia, what it is basically is this whole army in one child's life in the care system, and in they come, and they say it's dyslexia. So it's dyslexia consultant, and you've got clinical social workers. I was amazed to find clinical social workers are teaching extra education to children. The things that I found out in the last 3 years is amazing. It really is. But I forgot what I was saying. Oh, I get so carried away. Sorry. Okay. Tim knows and Andy knows me. Sorry. I hope I don't do it on the day of the conference because no one will speak.
No, I'm following what you're saying, Maggie. It's important that here we are, a group on Freedom Radio Talk. We are discussing the whole issue of what's going on within the labelling and drugging process, or the care process. Yet we have to make sure that other people are actually listening and making their own mind up. And it comes down to informed consent, which is another of my favorite terms. Childhood is not a mental disorder is my first one, and then informed consent. Can a parent or anyone make a fully informed choice about something when it comes from an opinion? Well, you can't. You're struggling, and what we've noticed more than anything, it comes along with the drugs. How can a parent make a fully informed choice if not told everything about the effects? I call them effects, not side effects. The effects of the drugs. They can't possibly make a fully informed choice because they don't know. And in Ireland recently, there was a mum who said she would never have given her child Prozac if she'd known the side effects. She doesn't have a child anymore. That's the problem. People are dying as a result of certain, psychiatric drugs prescribed for an opinion about a behavior, and then the person dies. And then the psychiatrist will say, well, obviously they were so mentally ill that, that's why they died. No, they died because of the drugs.
But mental illness, it's not only with the children, it goes way, way back. Well, Tim's got a lot of research on the Lebensborn program in the Nazi days. And also it goes back to when I did the HRT, women who were menopause before the war or during the war, they had electricity to the brain, electrical treatment to the brains for menopause. How come they're giving electric to the brain when a woman's menopausal? It's to do with the hormones. It's just, I'm sorry, I have to go back to its control. It's the Eugenics Society, which is now the world population. It's just controlling the minds and the people.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you agree with me. Who was that, Tim?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Maggie. It is. And the Tavistock Institute is connected to the eugenics program, and then you have the Rockefeller Foundation behind places like the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. And where did Dr. Mengele... where did Joseph Mengele... He's not a doctor. Doctor means teacher. And if he's a teacher, then I may as well just hang up my scholarly gown, because there's no use in the title whatsoever if we give it to him. He was a monster like none other.
I'm sure Brian is aware of the drugs, the experiments on children before the war. I'm sure you are, Brian.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly aware of them. But, here we are in the 21st century. Yeah. With a contemporary society where we're supposed to have human rights, where we've moved on. But you could say that the whole treatment issue, whereas back then you might have called it overt, it's now gone covert. Yeah. And we go back to the point that I think it was Tim that brought it up, and it was the chemical lobotomies. It's seen to be therapeutic now to treat these people with chemicals, but all it's doing is it's just exacerbating whatever condition they had in the first place and causing more problems. So here we are in this contemporary society, and you mirror it with what was going on before, and we've still got a similar problem.
I've noticed as of late, I don't watch TV very often, unless it's the early hours of the morning, but there are certain programs now where these, I don't even know because I don't see the whole program, the beginning, but I don't know if they're a doctor, but they're TV programs where the doctors are going in to the families' houses because these children are so disruptive, and these so-called medical people, I think they are teaching that child in the house not to be so disruptive. So why are they showing programs like that to the nation? It's like Jeremy Kyle and I don't know if you know that program, Brian. It's all push to the population. This is what you are, you plebs. Coronation Street, EastEnders, Naughty Children, all these programs. I say to people, you don't have to watch it on TV. You can see it everywhere. It's going on everywhere.
Maggie,
they're making money not only out of the drugs, the experts, but now bloody TV stations, channels.
Maggie, I wasn't listening very well. Did you mention Facebook Live channel, Jeremy Kyle?
Yes, I did.
Oh, sorry. It's Facebook Live, that is.
Oh, is it? Right, yeah. And so they're just, the whole population, all you people who are losing your children, you're all the same as these people on Jeremy Kyle. Women don't know who the fathers are. They're all alcoholic, drug addicts. And these poor children today don't really have a chance. Not one kid on earth is safe anymore. I don't think so. I really don't.
Again, I mean, from our perspective here at CCHR, we're looking into and investigating the human rights violations. What it is that, how has a person been abused in whatever way, whether it be a lack of informed consent, at which point the child has taken a drug and he's had an adverse reaction, which has been detrimental in more ways than one, or if a child has died, which is just heartbreaking, or, for example, we do get calls from people who have been physically restrained and sustained injuries in hospitals, or we get calls, not so often, but from ladies who have been assaulted. I find it very hard to imagine this going on, but they've been sexually assaulted in hospitals. It does go on. And, we receive these reports, and obviously we maintain confidentiality, and we look into it, we find out what happened, and then we report these things so that they are known about. Because that's the important thing, is that we can't just sweep it under the carpet. We've got to actually report these to the regulatory bodies. Whether they take action or not isn't the point. It's important to report it, because otherwise it would seem as though it never happened.
Well, apparently there are no figures for how many children in care die, but there are figures for children who die whilst at home with the families or whatever, but none for the children who die in care. How do we know if they're not being given drugs and they've died of drugs? How will we ever know? Because there's no way families know what's happening to a child in care. If they're on drugs, what treatments they're getting, we don't know. There's no human rights. And what I will do, Brian, I will send you some information which will help you with your investigation, actually.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
But children, it's just very sad. And for this was the reason why I called the charity Children Screaming to Be Heard, because they literally are.
There's a thing that you were alerting me to, and I've included it in the book, Maggie, that they're changing the names of the children in the care system so that they're abusive, in inverted commas, parents can't come after them at a later stage. And in the residential school system, inquiry over here about the number of children, native children that were abused and even murdered, killed in mass graves have been located all over this country. And the residential school system inquiry is now under the influence of an adjudicator named Dan Shapiro. They're trying to delete all the records, and we're talking about 800,000 documents regarding the witness testimony and the replies of officials that were involved in the running of the residential school system. If they erase those files, then there will be nothing to... They say they're doing it under the pretext of protecting the victims, but what protection do you have as a victim of your own government and institutions within your land against being systematically hunted down and murdered because of what you know, when there's no record of you even being involved in the crimes that are alleged? And furthermore, how can we possibly be able to know what abuses these children have faced in the care system when it is their own parents that have been labeled the abusers, when there's clear evidence that the care system itself is guilty of abuse? So if you label the parents the abusers and refuse to allow them to have contact with the children and even change the children's names, so that neither the children nor the parents can later track each other down, then you can see that there would be no way of ever exposing the abuses of the care system, which is, I would argue, the real abusers in a good proportion of the cases, and not the parents. So again, the experts are saying that the abusers are the parents, when in fact the experts in many cases are complicit in the abuse of the care system institution itself.
Well, the other point is, Tim, coming back to the name changing of the many children in care, is when these children are adults, and should they have an illness, and you'll always get asked, what sort of illnesses are in the family. How can the children answer? They have no records. Did you know that, Brian?
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's no. They grow up and they don't know. They've no idea.
This idea of name changing, I've not heard that before. That's news to me.
Yeah, well, Andy did put something out on Facebook, and I had quite a few replies come back in as well on the adoptions and even the fostering, and it is going on. It's like that every kid in care is covered by a life insurance. So what about the children who are drugged, go missing, murdered, whatever? I've questioned so many families. Did you claim on the insurance? What insurance? Because nobody knows about it, Brian. It needs taking up, because I know who the insurance company is and I know what's going on. But no one has picked up on it. But Christopher Booker said to me, bloody hell, Maggie, that is amazing. Nobody really realizes, Brian. But that needs to be picked up on, because who's got the money for these children who have been murdered and trafficked and taken ill and whatever? Something else to think about, you see. There's a hell of a lot going on in that care system, which, fortunately for me, I talk to the families, I do the research, and I'm getting it.
Right.
So,
wait, let's get back on track again, because I've had a couple of comments asking Brian, if parents are worried about their children being drugged, or the parents are worried that the doctors are not really doing the sort of the best thing for the child or the family, what do they do? Because like we're all saying, we have to believe the doctor. What do they do? Do they ring you up? Do they complain somewhere, or how
they can certainly ring us, Andy, and they can also go to our website, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make sure that people are fully informed. Whatever I say isn't going to necessarily change what somebody else thinks or says or the way they behave. But if I can inform them about with all the information that is available, then perhaps I've done something that's worthwhile. Because there's so much information, it can sometimes be confusing. It's like a sea of data. How do you know which is right and which is wrong? One has to evaluate the data in order to be able to know whether it's right or wrong. And that's why I try to put across, and I continue this statement that psychiatry is based on opinions, there are no tests. I keep coming back to that. But if a parent were to know that, then they would go, well, okay, they could therefore ask, to be devil's advocate, please could I see the laboratory tests that my child is mentally ill? There are no laboratory tests. You're not going to see any of that. But for sure, they can call us. We've got information leaflets that we can send out. We can direct them to different websites that we know about. There's so many different options rather than going to the guy who's going to give an opinion about the child's behavior.
Yeah, what happens if... Well, I'm scared to talk to you, Brian, because I know that social services will get involved. If I tell you about my situation with my doctor, my child might go into care because I've whistleblown to you. How can you protect me? How can I protect myself?
That is difficult. There's no doubt about it. Again, we're not a legal body. What we're here to do is investigate and look into these abuses that go on within the mental health system. And it is tough for that person, but if they can document everything that's going on, including threats, if that is said to them, whereby if they say something, and then there is some kind of threat to say, we will take your children away if you talk about this. Well, we are in a democracy. We do have freedom of speech. So it's important that a person can ask questions, even challenge something which isn't scientific, and be able to go forward from there rather than being afraid of what they're going to say. Anything that is reported to us, by the way, is held in the strictest confidence. We always maintain that, and we can't do anything without the say-so of the person who's making that report.
Right.
There is another thing, Brian.
Sorry, last question, Mags. How do people get in contact with your organisation, Brian? And mention the demo on Tuesday as well. And then Maggie's got a question. Okay. They can get in contact with CCHR here in the United Kingdom by calling 01342 313 926. Equally, they can email us on info@cchr.org.uk. Go to our website, that's www.cchr.org.uk. And if we can get a really big number of people on Tuesday at a demo, it's to coincide with a international congress of psychiatrists being held in London. We're gathering at 11 a.m. at St. Paul's Cathedral. We will move off from there at midday to the Barbican Centre where the protests will take place. And the whole theme of it is that childhood is not a mental disorder. And we want to raise the issue of human rights within the field of mental health.
I will be there, Brian, to represent children screaming to be heard.
Great, Maggie. Look forward to speaking with you and to seeing you in person.
Right, well, just what I was going to say, going back to the parents frightened to speak out. The other point is that there are families whose child is in care, and these families are being told now, if you speak out, if they've got other family members with children, those other children or family members are also told, if your sister or brother speaks out, you will also lose your children. I mean, the social services, the social workers in this country are the biggest army. They are a law to themselves. They can do anything they want. It's incredible what I hear via this helpline. And
interesting, who is making that threat to the parents?
Social workers.
Okay.
And I'll fill you in on something on that as well, because I really think I've found the body that can do something on the research and evidence I've got. You guys.
Right.
It will, if we can do it, it will blow the lid. It really will.
I think we'll be meeting, and we'll be having quite a few meetings and discussions.
Well, we've got to help the children, and the only way we can do that is to put a stop to it is by blowing up what's going on the inside. Many of the social workers throughout this country, while still working for the system and getting paid by the social services, a lot of social workers have their own companies registered at Companies House. So they are bringing in the children, and as we know, they get a little backhanders and they get their wages. Then they use their own outside companies to do assessments, etc. Oh, there's a hell of a lot going on.
Mhm. No, I'm tracking. I'm hearing you.
Good.
Okay.
One point. I think an article and it was published with the Telegraph, and it was published on April 3rd, 2014. So if you want to look into it, social services have asked the High Court to give 2 children new names and even cut links with other siblings to protect them from their so-called abusive parents. 2 young children put up for adoption should be given completely new identities to prevent their abusive parents tracking them down through an internet campaign, the High Court was told.
Dr. Dennehy, Brian, who's speaking at the conference, she, the psychiatrist, she's very concerned at the amount of children being sent into care as opposed to being sent to live with the grandparents or another family member.
Okay.
She's very concerned. She's a lovely old lady.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dr. Dennehy's fantastic. I don't know if you've got this picture now, guys, and listeners. Well, what happens is social workers and organisations, doctors, they find vulnerable families. They then start picking on them by giving them drugs or telling them they're no good. Once they've had drugs or they're no good, their self-esteem goes. They go into social work care. Then once in the care system, everyone makes money. The families are no more. This is going to happen until we march en masse, I'm afraid. I'm sure you agree.
Absolutely.
It's really annoying, Brian. Maggie's done all she can in 40 years. You're doing the same, and hopefully you've got a few years left. I mean, me too. But I think the truth is with the nation, the truth is with the children, but only the nation can change things. Because if we allow politicians, doctors, even bullies at school, then we're no good, are we? We're letting ourselves down. We need to stand up. I mean, the other day, just a small example, policeman comes on the phone. I want to hear all about your blockade because you're not allowed to do this and that and the other. And it was just the way he was talking to me. And I had a witness on the other line, and I talked back to him like he talked to me. Then he backed down. So it does work.
I've been saying this for 40 years to everyone. You must get out there. You must speak back. Don't let them keep getting away with everything. And that's what people do because they are so frightened. They're frightened of everything out there. And they mustn't be. They've got to learn to open their mouth. I mean, I travelled the world from the age of 19. Oh, you're from England. Oh, right. Little doors, little windows. And follow the sheep. But they don't, sorry, Brian.
It's okay. It's good that you have an opinion. So many people they're willing to just, not make a noise. They're not willing to speak out. And that's why that's why we demo. That's why we protest. That's why we write to the press. That's why we document abuse cases. We're here, at the end of the day, and it comes back to that again, informed choice. Is a person allowed to make a fully informed choice, and is a parent allowed to give fully informed consent to their children? No. We have to make sure that all the information is available so that they can do that.
We are so lucky to have been contacted by your organisation for you to become one of the speakers. Highly honoured, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, Maggie. Thank you for the invite. It comes back to the point that if you know something, you've got to share it. If there's a certain subject, and you've got to make sure that other people know about it. And that's why I've been doing this now for 14 years. And if I can make change to a person's life by virtue of letting them know that they're not fully informed, I will direct them to the point of being fully informed so that they can make that change.
Well, I'm just hoping that on the demonstration and on this conference that everybody comes out. I mean, as far as I know, Andy said there's about 400 people already booked for the conference, which is fantastic because I've been now in the children's field for 3 years. And I did start to go to a few conferences and demos in the very beginning, but you'd be lucky if 20 or 30 people arrived.
Yeah.
And these conferences, all that you had was everybody standing up talking about their own case. Well, you can go on Facebook and see all what's going on. This conference is for people to come and learn and to listen to people such as you. We've got Michael Bailey. He's a well-known barrister who wins many cases. You'll like Michael Bailey. He's very down-to-earth. He's helped people free of charge here and there. I know he has. He is a humanitarian barrister. But, unfortunately, they have to abide by rules, as you know.
Of course.
Yeah, but he's very good.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's been a barrister for over. Well, he's been in the legal world for over 20 years, but well respected.
Anyway, Maggie, we've got and Brian. Sorry, Brian, we've got about 5 minutes left with you, but and then we've got another guest from the USA. He's a candidate for the up and coming elections over there.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me and for allowing me to speak.
No problem at all. But I was just trying to mute Maggie again because we've got 5 minutes left of what you've got to sort of say to us. But on that note, before you finish off with what's going on and how you can help people, is the conference for the Children's Scream to be Heard is 25th of July between 9 and 5 at the Resource for London Centre on Holloway Road. We have Russian artist Albina, we have Rosie Carechild, Michael Unsworth, who wrote the song Calling You, Calling Me for the charity, Laura Leon, she's a sculptress, and hopefully she will get that monument one day for the children who have died, missing or murdered in the care system. We've got the famous DJ, the Emperor Roscoe from the US.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Yeah, he can't be there personally, but he's reading out a statement. We'll get our good Tim Spearman, the author of the book on Lebensbaum. We've got the MP John Hemmings. Vicky Haig was jailed because of loving her kids too much, as I put it. The journalist and broadcaster Sonia Poulton of ITV and Independent Media. Of course, yourself at 12:30 on that day. And then we've got forced adoptions, Ian Joseph, Dr. Dennehy, and finishing with the barrister Michael Bailey. So, and then we'll have questions and answers in the last hour. So that's what's going on the 25th of July. We've got the demo Tuesday at St Paul's Cathedral, meeting 11 a.m. and then moving on to the Barbican. And finally, if anybody's still got any energy left, come and block the motorway on the 24th of July at South Mim Services for 10 o'clock. And in the afternoon, I just pray and beg that you all will attend the candlelight vigil at between 3 and 4 p.m. in Soho Square in London. To be totally honest with you, it's a bit of a front for a big demo that's going to hit people where it hurts very peacefully. It'll be so peaceful you'll hear nobody speak a word, but the power that this last demo before the conference will give around the world, throughout the media, the celebs, the paedophilia ring, it will bring out the biggest message ever, because there's only one place in London. If you demonstrate outside, you're going to hit the mark around the world. So the candlelight vigil, it's to start with, it's remembering Baby P, it's remembering Victoria Klimbay, it's remembering Daniel Pelker, it's remembering your child, my child, and her child. But really, after that, we're going with our leaflets, standing outside a couple of places, and we know we will get the biggest attention for the abuse of children around the world that we've ever had in our times. Anyway, that's me ranting off. So, Brian, if you want to just finish up with where people can get help and support, and yeah, it'd be lovely to meet you on the 25th of July.
Look forward to it. Yes, they can contact us at Citizens Commission on Human Rights via the web at www.cchr.org.uk. They can email at info@cchr.org.uk, and you can phone us 01342 313 926. And for anyone who can join us, come along on Tuesday, and it's going to be at 11 a.m. is the gathering time at St. Paul's Cathedral, and we're going to move off at midday to the Barbican Centre, where an international congress is taking place, and we're going to protest there. And it's all about raising human rights within the field of mental health, and everyone is welcome.
Thank you, Brian. It was a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for taking your valuable time to be on our show. We do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you, Brian. And don't forget, Tim, you can shake his hand on the 25th of July, because Tim's coming from Canada.
Fantastic. Look forward to that.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Tim, I'm going to take a bit of a break for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to get our candidate from the US, Nick. I can't even pronounce his name, so we'll get the guy on, but my voice is going. Thanks,
Okay.
Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
now.
Andy. Thanks, Tim. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Knights of Liberty Show Live with Andy Peacher from the UK and Timothy Spearman from Canada. Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 5 p.m. UK time. Find the Knights of Liberty radio show on Facebook or visit Tim's website at www.shakespeare.com or visit www.lulu.com. Search for Timothy Spearman and find his book Sailing the Seven Seas, Butterfly Dreams and Odds on Favourite. Visit the station's website at www.freedomtalkradio.co.uk or email the show at freedomtalkradio2013@gmail.com. Skype us at Freedom Talk Radio 1. Thanks for listening to the Knights of Liberty show.
freedomtalkradio.co.uk.
Let's go!
This is the most diverse, most amazing, one of the funniest radio stations you could ever listen to on the internet. I've heard so much stuff from the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights.
The politics, the non-politics, the schmolitics, whatever you want to call them.
It's great.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is freedomtalkradio.net, and you are listening to Freedom Talk Radio.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Yeah, welcome back to the Knights of Liberty show. Very soon we'll be joined by Nick Wako-san. He's a candidate in Congress District 18 in Florida. His websites are www.picnic2014.com and, of course, www.teapartytribune.com. While we wait for our guest to join us, I'm just going to have a quick horse ride, and then me and Tim will be back with you very shortly.
Now listen to my story, yes, listen while I sing of days of old in England when Arthur was the king, of Merlin the magician and Guinevere the queen, and Lancelot the bravest knight the world has ever seen. In days of old, when knights were bold, this story told of Lancelot. He rode the wilds of England, adventures for to seek, to rescue maidens in distress and help the poor and weak. If anyone oppressed you, he'd be your champion. He fought 1,000,000 battles and he never lost a one. In days of old, when knights were bold, his story told of Lancelot. In days of old, when knights were bold, his story told of Lancelot.
Hello, folks. Andy's just gone off on a little horsey ride for a brief moment, so I'm just going to mind the trail, I guess you could say, until he gets back. So there's some interesting stories that have come across my desk in the last few hours, and I just thought I'd share some information with our listeners. I'm worried that there's something pending down in the United States. There's indications that the Center for Disease Control has indicated that there's as many as 84 anthrax cases down in the United States. So possible U.S. anthrax cases rise to 84. The number of health workers potentially exposed to anthrax has risen to 84, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention has said. The count of those at risk of illness has risen from the 75 initially reported on Thursday. The U.S. Health Agency said researchers in a high-level biosecurity laboratory failed to follow proper procedures and did not inactivate the bacteria. The exposure occurred in Atlanta on the weekend. The FBI has told the BBC it is helping the CDC to investigate. The agency said it was too early to determine whether the transfer was accidental or intentional. Well, I can tell you right now, it was intentional, and this is the latest false flag terror operation orchestrated by the U.S. government. Bioweapon attack upon its own population. It will lead to a pretext, and that pretext will effectively demand that some emergency be declared. Martial law will come into effect, at least in the area affected. No doubt they will endorse forced vaccinations, and in the process they will seed something with the vaccinations, including a possible RFID chip. So we know that vaccines are being forced upon the population for various reasons, and Dr. Carley goes on at length about that all the time. So just thought I'd let you know about that little issue. Okay, so Andy's back. Andy, would you like to call in our guest?
Yeah, the agreement was he would ring us, and he's a couple of minutes late. So let's bear with him for a minute until I'll try and contact them while you're reading another story.
Well, the anthrax issue is something that I really think we need to talk about. Anthrax bacteria live primarily in inactive spores and are found naturally in the soil, but people can ingest or inhale spores, which can make the anthrax active. Well, this came from a lab, and they are probably going to say it was an accident. I don't believe it. I do believe that this is the latest false flag terror operation. And anthrax was deployed as a threat after the September 11th attacks back in 2001. And where did it come from? But Fort Detrick. Fort Detrick is named after a Second World War field marshal on the German side. So what the heck is the American government with a bioweapon facility run by the CIA naming it after a field marshal on the German side from World War II? Obviously, that rings a warning bell right there that we've got Nazis within our own government. The Americans should realize that. And so the bioweapons program run by the CIA is run right out of Fort Detrick. And by the way, it changed its name to Lytton Bionetics, and they're engaged in a lot of experimental work over in Uganda and other North African states. And don't be surprised if you find that that's where the Ebola came from, that is now a serious threat over in the African continent. As for the anthrax spores that showed up in the office of Senator Leahy and Senator Dashiell, the reason that they received their special deliveries of anthrax in 2001 was sent on the 11th month and the 9th day, so they also had the 9/11 signature in an apparent effort to frame Muslim terrorists, which they also falsely blamed for the September 11th attacks, because any way you look at it, Osama bin Laden and the boys are working for the American government because speaking of Brzezinski, one of the heads of the CIA said that Taliban, the Mujahideen, and Al-Qaeda had all been created by a $3.5 billion effort on the part of the CIA to create these terrorist cells in Central Asia, which would be capable of creating a war on terror that would basically bankrupt the Soviet Union with an unwinnable war against terror. And so now the very agencies or the various terrorist groups that they created are now causing blowback on the American government and causing the American nation to go bankrupt on this unwinnable and interminable war on terror. And so that was what was intended all along, to bankrupt the two superpowers with these wars, in which they would be bankrolled for their efforts by the Rothschilds, which are a Vatican banking establishment family, as are all of the banking establishment, Illuminati, Luciferian, satanic bloodline families. They're all working for the Vatican, which means the House of Cain. And as for all of the different secret societies that were created by the House of Cain, the Vatican, which calls itself the company because they try to pretend that they're of the company of Jesus. And what does the CIA call itself but the company, which means that it's the American branch of the Vatican's military order, which is the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order of the Vatican is basically what the CIA is under an American label. So all these false flag terror operations run worldwide are meant to divide the people and conquer the people, order op chaos. And the Roman Empire never died. You might have heard the old saying, the sun will never set on the British Empire. Well, the sun never set on the Roman Empire, and the British Empire was just an extension of the Roman Empire. So it never died, and it's still well and truly going, and all the secret societies and intelligence services that operate under its rubric are still very, very active. When people say to me things like, Freemasonry doesn't have much power, it's just an old gentleman's club and it's going defunct and they're losing members every year, I just say, bullshit, come on. Don't try and obfuscate and make up stories and suggest that things aren't just going along tickety-boo like they always have. They're still going strong. All these organizations are still going strong. They're still active. And by the way, it wasn't Al-Qaeda that orchestrated the anthrax attacks on those U.S. senators and upon Congress officials. It was the government of the United States itself through the CIA's own laboratory, Fort Detrick. The same laboratory that brought you HIV/AIDS. Who holds the patent on HIV/AIDS but Robert Gallo? And he and his colleague, Garth Nicholson, worked at Fort Detrick. They unleashed the plague of HIV/AIDS upon the people of the world. So lay blame where it deservedly should be laid, at the feet of the perpetrators, people. Okay, so Andy, how are we doing?
No, I don't know what's happened this time. So we'll leave that one unless he does get in touch. But I've emailed them, and I guess a politician's life is never without trouble.
Oh, absolutely. But do you know why they did the anthrax attacks and why they sent them to the U.S. senators, Andy? You know what it was because of? Because they were lobbying against the Patriot Act and didn't want it to be seen as passing. The Patriot Act was being voted upon in Congress at that time. It was late 2001, just after the September 11th attacks, and they were staunch opponents of the Patriot Act, and so to silence them, they were basically threatened. They had their lives threatened with anthrax. And while the media initially tried to blame Al-Qaeda because of the signature 9/11, the fact that it was sent out on that very, very conspicuous date, the 11th month and the 9th day of November, trying to put a 9/11 signature on the sending of the anthrax. It turned out to be a government agent that worked at Fort Detrick where the anthrax itself was traced to, and not surprisingly, because that's the lab that produced it. It's weaponized anthrax, right? So how did this anthrax get out most recently? Because of the same type of lab work going on. And don't tell me it was an accident. Bullshit. And come on with your antics. Don't try and tell us that this was an honest mistake. You're not honest and you don't make mistakes. Everything you do is deliberate. The District of Criminals doesn't do anything honest, and it doesn't do anything without direct, culpable, willful acts of criminality. So don't try and suggest to us that it's an accident. You're criminals. And you try to make people like me and Andy look like criminals. No, we're not. You are. That's the end of it. That's all there is to it. Now, you can obfuscate and you can tell your tales and you can lie before the cameras, but ultimately you're criminals. And oh, by the way, your Billy Clinton has been implicated in a pedophile scandal. He's been found as being directly linked to a criminal that ran an island for the global elite, who happened to be a man by the name of Epstein, who faced indictments and was put away. And now they have linked Bill Clinton to that whole ugly affair. And who else was Epstein buddies with? Prince Andrew. So there you go. The royals, the aristocrats, the elites, and the presidents and the prime ministers are all linked to these pedophile scandals time and time and time and time and time again. It is endless. It goes on forever. So, Andy, it's disgusting what goes on with the elites. And Hillary Clinton was just scandalized recently when an old tape emerged having her laughing at the plight of a 12-year-old rape victim because she was able to have the material evidence, the one piece of material evidence that would have indicted the 3 rapists who gang raped the poor girl, thrown out of court, and she gleefully laughs at the fact that she managed to have the case against these creeps thrown, it wasn't exactly thrown out of court, but they got a very much reduced sentence. They were only sentenced to 1 year in jail. So this is the psychopath that the American government plans to have take over in 2015. All I can say is say your Hail Marys and pray, because it's going to be a nightmare like you've never seen when the horror of Babylon takes over. Anyway, Andy, what have you got there article-wise? Anything?
Yeah, I've got something about the Pope, and I don't know what's going on here, but before I do read that out, we can confirm that all these events that we're all holding in July for the children, Screaming to Be Heard, organisation, charity, we do have the Reverend Kevin Annett going to attend all of these events that we're putting on. And my article in relation to Kevin is about Pope Francis. Now, it's not directly linked what Kevin Annett's doing, but Pope Francis attacks evil mafia in the Rangheta base. Pope Francis has condemned the mafia's adoration of evil at a mass in Calabria, the southern Italian base of the needy Rangheta crime syndicate. The Pope said the gangsters were effectively excommunicated or banished in the eyes of the church. Earlier, the Pope visited the jailed father of a 3-year-old boy who had been killed in a park mob hit over an unpaid drug debt. The Pope has repeatedly spoken out against organised crime and corruption in Italy and around the world. Yeah, strange. His latest condemnation, delivered before a crowd of tens of thousands, described the N. di Rangheta as the adoration, I can't say these words, of evil and contempt of the common good. Those who in their lives follow this path of evil are not communion with God. The Reuters news agency quoted him as saying they are excommunicated. He met with prisoners and all this on the island of Sicily. But what shocked me when I was reading this, he's going against the mafia. Okay, fair enough. We don't like gangsters and all that stuff, drug pushers. But Pope Francis and the whole of the Vatican are drug pushers, child abusers. I mean, how can they say that?
I know. And the Pentagon, I find this really quite laughable, is that the Pentagon has been linked to running a child porn ring, and many of their officials have been found, embroiled in a Pentagon scandal. Here, let me read it for you so that you are aware of this. I mean, these are the people snooping on the world's citizens to try to snoop on our activities, and yet they show themselves to be the most predatory criminals on the planet themselves. I mean, come on. I mean, this is getting so out of hand. It's untrue, Andy. And the level of hypocrisy, it's beyond laughable. It's a comedy. It is. It's a tragicomedy, is what it is. And they have the audacity to snoop on what we're watching on the internet. I mean, good God, listen to this. Last week, the IRS decided, well, actually last week, by what terms last week? It's a bit of a dated article at this point. But anyway, the IRS decided to award Bradley Birkenfeld his $104 million share for helping bust UBS Bank. Senator Charles Grassley and his staff were instrumental. Senator Grassley vowed to delay pending Department of Treasury nominations with the IRS whistleblower program. He wrote the legislation in 2006 for continued to be mismanaged. So this powerful voice from Iowa has been a beacon in the storm during the Obama administration, which has targeted whistleblowers as never before. The Pentagon is also under Senator Grassley's fire for failing to examine 1,700 of the 5,200 reports of employees doing child porn. The Pentagon claimed it wasn't a priority. Senator Grassley and his staff have made it one. The closed investigation into widespread use of child porn at the Pentagon has now been reopened. There is a national crisis of federal employees engaged in the child porn industry and a related epidemic at the state level. 2 states, Vermont and Maine, appear to be running state-protected child trafficking rings with evidence of cops, judges, lawyers, clergy, and government employees covering up for each other. This kind of racketeering creates powerful and extremely profitable pedophile rings. Money is a significant catalyst behind the crime. It's estimated that a criminal willing to molest a child in front of a live webcam can earn $1,000 a night. In Kittery, Maine, at the Danish Health Club, one bus yielded $6.1 million in door fees over a 5-year period, with prostitutes earning $12 million. The earnings of pimps were not reported. The doorman was a retired police officer whose wife worked in the back. How charming. They must be just a charming pair. And this bust happened because of one hard-working IRS agent named Rod Geiger. There you go. So, shall I continue, Andy, or you think I should continue?
Yeah, you continue. After that, I've got a couple of stories to finish off the show, and it's regarding, I never saw this when Brian was on, children's mental health.
An estimated $1.4 billion has been collected by the IRS's whistleblower program since 2006. $464 million collected in 2010, but only $48 million in 2011. Half of all global child porn is produced in America, and what do you want to make a bet, Andy, that most of it is actually by government officials? What do you want to make a bet?
Well,
10 new images of children are posted daily. Estimates of the global profits for child porn range from $3 to $20 billion. Imagine what the IRS whistleblower program could collect if they focused on child trafficking as Agent Rod Geiger did in Maine. Wow, that's heavy, isn't it?
Very heavy. And the event we're doing, Tim, it's going to be a long life when you get to Britain, because the first day you'll have a rest. The second day or third day we're going to go into the motorway and do whatever we can do to raise awareness. But in that afternoon, we're saying we're having a candlelight vigil. All the good stuff is yet to be announced on the day, but it's exactly the terminology we're going to be putting on our banners is come clean against child porn and child abuse. So that is our message as parents, campaigners. It's a little bit more of an activism event, because Maggie's trusted me to sort of arrange it with another friend of hers, and we're going to make the second event on the Blockade Day the biggest ever around the world, Tim. So it's only for children. We're not bothered what happens to us personally. We're only here to make people happy, at the end of the day. So it'll be a fantastic time when you get over here, and I'm going to pray to God that, the book gets over here safely, you get over here safely, there won't be too many inconveniences. At least you don't have to rely on computers, well, apart from the plane ride, and then you have to, well, whatever. so I'm being a bit morbid now. But no, I've found this article, and it's a bit too late, because we're saying that mental health people, the doctors and the psychiatrists, they love to give drugs. But now this article a couple of days ago in BBC News in Health says mental health services are cutting, which is affecting children. This is by Jeremy Cook, the UK Affairs correspondent. Cuts in mental health services for children in England amount to a national crisis with tragic consequences, a charity has said. More than half of the councils in the UK have cut or frozen budgets for child and adolescent mental health teams, according to official figures by the charity Young Minds. Experts believe early care is better for patients and value for money. But budget reductions meant tough decisions were necessary, according to the local government association. Provision of mental health services for young people varies widely across England, with entry-level care largely funded by the local authorities, which are trying to slash spending. Now, before we go on, okay, the local authorities look at it from the other point of view. They're not giving the drugs anymore. They're worried about the purse. So what they're doing now, Tim, mental health services in the councils in England and Wales, they're cutting them. So let's say we'll go on the other bush now. The child needs these tablets, but they're not getting them. Or whatever the case is, they're making sure that in any event, whether it's giving the child the drugs because they're so-called crazy, or whether it's the other way round, they can't get the drugs and then they go crazy, they've created a system which it doesn't matter which way you go as a child or parent, you will lose them children to the social services. You can't win. So there's kind of no reason to read out the rest of that now. I've just clicked. Can't win.
You are a card. Okay.
I'm the ace of spades, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, a former pro-GMO scientist speaks out on the real dangers associated with GMOs. Man, is there any good news? Let me have a look here. What does this dude have to say? It says, I retired 10 years ago after a long career as a research scientist for Agriculture Canada. And when I was on the payroll, I was the designated scientist of my institute to address public groups and pressure them that genetically engineered crops and foods were safe. There is, however, a growing amount of information to suggest that that's not the case. Scientific research done in Europe, Russia, and other countries shows that diets containing engineered corn or soya cause serious health problems in laboratory mice and rats. I don't know if I was passionate about it, but I was knowledgeable. I defended the side of technological advance, science, and progress. In the last 10 years, I have changed my position. I've started paying attention to the flow of published studies coming from Europe, some from prestigious labs and published in prestigious scientific journals that question the impact and safety of engineered food, or refute the claims of the biotech companies that their engineered crops yield more, that they require less pesticide applications, that they have no impact on the environment, and of course, that they are safe to eat. There are a number of scientific studies that have been done for Monsanto by universities in the U.S., Canada, and abroad, and most of these studies are concerned with the field performance of the engineered crops, and of course they find GMOs safe for the environment and therefore safe to eat. Individuals should be encouraged to make their decisions on food safety based on scientific evidence and personal choice, not on emotion or the personal opinions of others. Anyway, that's interesting because David Suzuki, who's a scientist here that had a program on Canadian Broadcasting Company, CBC, for many years called The Nature of Things, and is a respected scientist worldwide. Whether he deserves that respect or not, I can't personally vouch for, because there's so many frauds in our world. How can one guess anymore who's honest and who isn't? But all I can say is he's called the GMO issue into
90 seconds
himself recently, and I know that I did come across an article, and it might have been sent to me by Rebecca Carley, but there's claims that in the GMOs, there's also efforts to alter our genetics. And no, it wasn't Dr. Carley, it was someone else. But there's an effort to actually tamper with our DNA.
60 seconds.
And I have to say that there's evidence to suggest, Andy, apparently, that it involves the alien races trying to tamper with our genetics. So, curious. Could it be? I wouldn't be surprised.
Yep.
Just thought I'd throw a little exopolitics into the mix there, but anyway.
Yeah, you never know, do you?
No, you never know. So, what have you got there? Anything?
Well, the last thing I haven't got any more articles, but I have got the quote for the day, though. So, June 21, quote for the day, and it's from
10 seconds.
I'll be quiet, you. And it's from my friends at the goodnewsnetwork.org. And the quote of the day is very simple. The future has several names. For the weak, it is impossible. For the faint-hearted, it is unknown. For the thoughtful and valiant, it is ideal. And that was by Victor Hugo.
I like that. That's beautiful.
Oh dear, we're getting better, I think, as time goes on.
For the faint of heart. Yeah, I think I'm in that category. I'm not in the last category where I can see the future as ideal. I'm not a pessimist, Andy, nor am I an optimist. I think that life has taught me to be something of a hopeful realist.
Yeah, you've got to be a realist, otherwise you'll either go bonkers one way or bonkers the other way. But no, I'm just happy to be alive and happy to be back on the track of normality. A little, well, it's not a story, more of a comment. Great Britain now, England, out of the World Cup, because they will never, ever, ever in God's history ever win. They should actually give up football, and I'm sorry if no one agrees with me, but show me the evidence where they win. They never have done. But this time they made history. Since late 1940s, they've got the quickest exit out of the World Cup, only 6 days in history. So there you go. And I don't think it's management.
What I don't get, Andy, is how can Manchester United be a world-famous football club, and yet it's not, the country itself is not able to produce a winning team in the World Cup? Can you explain that?
Well, actually, it's not just Manchester. We've got, well, I won't say Liverpool, but maybe Chelsea and other teams around the UK. They've got fantastic international players, but when they put them together, they seem to go the opposite. They don't play as good.
You think it's because you've got too many prima donnas with too big an ego, and instead of working as a team, they work at cross purposes? You think that's possibly why? Maybe,
or there was that ABBA song, "Money, money, money, it's a rich man's world."
Yeah, could be. Interesting. So it all comes down to poor management. I remember this Dutch football coach went over to Korea to train the Korean squad when Korea and Japan hosted the World Cup back in the year 2000. And it was corrupt, of course, the whole way in which the South Koreans went about trying to choose the athletes for the team traditionally was based on, well, whose son are you? Oh, okay. And is your father the head of Hyundai Motors? Is he the head of that firm, LG? Oh, really? And so, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll select you as a candidate because your father's rich and powerful. Anyway, they kept hitting this Dutch football coach and tried to persuade him that he needed to hire this person and that person onto the squad. And he said, well, if they pass the tryouts and they do well, I'll select them naturally. But you're asking me to bring this person on board simply because of who their father is and how well connected they are? Tell you what, here's the deal. Either you back off and let me run the team, or I get on the next plane and go home. How be that? And so anyway, because he wouldn't kowtow to the corrupt whims of the crony system in South Korea, he ended up putting together the best squad they ever had. And the very man that they castigated and criticized ended up giving them a winning team, and then he became a national hero. So this is the kind of hypocrisy that every society on the planet shows, and it's getting a little tiresome. It's time we grew up, Andy? It really is.
Yeah, let me read this out. I know we're going over time on Blog Talk, and that's recording, but we're still live on the website, freedomtalkradio.net. I want to read this out now. This has given me a magic idea, and if you think psychology, mentality, and if people do this, and at the end, it may not necessarily be big money, but it could be a good way of gathering people on the 24th of July in London. Now, the Telegraph reports today, hidden cash. Londoners descend on Kensington Gardens to hunt for cash envelopes. Londoners find the envelopes hidden by the California businessman near Kensington Gardens, Peter Pan statue, after following online clues. Hundreds of Londoners descended on Kensington Gardens on Saturday to hunt for envelopes of cash hidden in bushes and tree stumps after a series of cryptic treasure hunt-style clues were posted on Twitter and Facebook. The online scavenger hunt was the latest hidden cash giveaway by an anonymous group of California millionaires who began hiding money in public spaces around San Francisco last month, but the first outside the US. Members of the public began arriving at the London Park yesterday morning after organisers revealed that 20 envelopes would be hidden where blue meets green, a reference to the Piccadilly and District Underground lines, and a location which shares its name with a San Francisco street. Now, we've got time, to do something very similar. I just think that's an awesome idea.
It is. It's very colorful. My goodness. My goodness. Man, wouldn't you love having a money tree and growing in the backyard?
I prefer the apples, but yeah, money would be good.
So, what time is it, old friend? It's
2:07 Eastern Standard Time.
I have to adjust my clock. It's lying to me. It's 10 minutes slow.
All right, then. Well, we're back on Monday with the truth, please. It's just me and you, so we can catch up on some stories. And we'll get some more guests on in the future. But, yeah, I think we need to close the show. And thanks to Brian Daniels of CCHR. Sorry to Nick from picnic.com campaign. I don't know what's happened there. And thanks to Maggie, yourself, Tim, and Bill Zam and freedomtalkradio.net. Don't forget to listen to Bill. The show Surrounded by Idiots will be on tonight at 5 p.m. Or 6 p.m. I can't remember now. Eastern Standard Time. But from Tim and Andy, the Knights of Liberty, we're going to say bye-bye. Bye, Tim.
Bye, bro.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
I didn't think my voice would get through that. It's been playing up.
Yeah, I wonder what's wrong with your throat.
It's not sore or nothing. It just keeps going.
Strange.
Maggie's got in there.
Maybe it's the chemtrails.
Yeah, Maggie's got in there.
Hey, Maggie. Maggie's the frog in your throat.
Are you there, Mr. Zam, or shall we talk tomorrow? He's been broadcasting on Spreaker for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's probably busy, knowing that man, he works so hard for Freedom Talk Radio, and we've got a social network site going as well.
Cool. Very good. Well, I don't know what the deal is with the book, Andy, because